Finding my wife called me a fool and was pregnant by another, I made her leave penniless. I'm 33 years old and my wife is 27. Wife is 27. We tied the knot 6 months ago after a year of dating. We initially met online and after a few dates we decided to commit to a serious relationship which quickly led to marriage. Myself a bit of a nerd, so when an attractive girl who told me she loved me expressed interest, I was completely in love. I would have done anything for her, and she knew it. I have a demanding job, owning a small business that requires frequent travel. I'm rarely at home. Before taxes, I was making $150,000 a year and she was $150,000 a year, and she wasn't employed, so basically she was totally dependent on me for her livelihood. A little lazy, but I didn't think much of it because I let her. She was never one to do housework, cooking or cleaning. A few months into our marriage, my wife dropped the bombshell that she was pregnant. Unfortunately, I was out of town at the time, so I had to drop everything and rush home the next day. The next day, I took her to a clinic that confirmed she was 2 months pregnant. A week later, I came home from the office to get something for a job I was about to do and noticed my wife's car in the garage. Car in the garage, indicating that she was home. When I opened the door, I heard noises coming from the bedroom. As I followed the escalating noises before reaching the bedroom, I already had a sinking feeling about what was happening. To make matters worse, they left the door wide open, so I walked in to find her engaged in an intimate act with another man. The first words out of her mouth were that it wasn't what it appeared to be. 2 months pregnant at the time, I couldn't put into words how I felt watching her with another man in our own bedroom. I had mentally prepared myself to be a father and had built my world around her, making every effort to make her comfortable. And yet there she was in our bedroom being unfaithful. That moment revealed her true nature, both of them. She stared at me in shock as I turned away and left the room, trying to convince me that I hadn't seen what I had clearly witnessed. Witnessed as if I were a gullible fool, I regained my composure and quickly retrieved what I needed before leaving. Before I left, I made it clear that she should be gone by the time I returned on the drive back to work. I was a wreck, my thoughts were scattered, and I was lucky not to have had an accident that I couldn't help but think about. All the time she had professed her love for me. Now that I realized it was all a facade, I had no idea of her deception. Because my job kept me away during the week, she had played her part so convincingly that I never suspected she was trying to get me to support her. Her through her pregnancy and then raise another man's child. My wife bombarded me with phone calls and left me voicemails that I chose not to answer. I called a friend who waited for about 2 hours before going to my apartment. My friend informed me that she had taken her. I then went to Home Depot and changed all the locks on the house. Discovered that she was staying with her family, so I contacted my attorney and served her with divorce papers. He told me not to take calls from her family or friends, and if I did, to be polite. With mutual friends, to be polite, but to refrain from discussing the divorce. He insisted that he should handle any related conversations on my behalf. He was right, and although I had no desire to instigate anything, it was wise. In order to avoid any potential complications or provocations, we coordinated through text messages for her to pick up her remaining belongings. The following weekend, my boyfriend acted as my representative while she collected the rest of her belongings. In response, she retaliated by hiring a divorce lawyer and demanding $2,000 a month in alimony for 5 years. Alimony for 5 years, arguing that the pregnancy was mine and that she needed financial support. She also wanted to stay on my health insurance. Despite her alimony demands, I chose not to react with anger. It's a good thing it went through my attorney first, because he informed me that while she may have expected certain things, it wasn't going to happen. While I didn't mind sharing the assets I earned during our marriage, my primary goal was to get her out of my life. But I wasn't willing to continue paying her monthly payments for 5 years for her misbehavior, continue to pay for her health insurance, and raise a child that clearly wasn't mine. Support from the men she had been involved with when I discussed with my attorney how to navigate around the alimony and other obligations I didn't want to fulfill. We considered her lack of employment, which I earned $150,000 a year before taxes, and she was completely dependent on me for her financial well-being. Our ultimate goal was to get the alimony completely eliminated, which we did, but his concern was that if we could not get it eliminated, we should seek to significantly reduce it based on her actions, even though it wasn't explicitly written. He pointed out that in many cases the courts tend to favor women and that there was a risk that her women, and there was a risk that her lawyer would try to portray me as an enabler and blame me for her infidelity. Infidelity, it didn't take into account that I had been doing this job for over 3 years and that we had been together for almost a year before the cheating occurred. The only minor difference might have been that I was working an hour or so less during that time, but it was still a significant workload, typically 60 to 80 hours a week. Even more now, 6+ years later, if I hadn't caught her, she might be even more dependent on me today. That is why my attorney advised a strong approach that, in hindsight, may have been overkill, but I trusted his expertise. Given his experience in these matters, he wasn't infallible himself. My attorney was looking for evidence of my wife's infidelity to strengthen my case in the divorce proceedings. He suggested that I hire a private investigator to gather more evidence that could be used in court. My attorney arranged for the investigator to work on my behalf, although I paid the investigator directly. To say that he did an excellent job would be an understatement. I hope I never have to face him on the opposing side in a situation like this. Me, not as extensively as he did her, but just to make sure, for the lawyer's sake, that I wasn't contributing to the problems. Otherwise I might have supported her financially for a couple of years, usually about 5, but it might even go on until she remarried, although that's pretty rare these days. I suppose having a job like mine doesn't help. Not long after I hired the private investigator, he found evidence of her spending time with the same guy I had caught her with The same guy I caught her with said I made a mistake by not canceling my credit card that she had access to. As a result, she went out with her lover that night and ran up a bill of about $5,000. These weren't high-limit cards. Had gotten them mainly to improve my credit score, and since I had been on a cash-only basis for a while, I had forgotten about them. A month later, the private investigator discovered that she had been cheating throughout our marriage and even before that. He identified 2 guys she had been involved with, but had subsequently broken things off with. Both of them agreed to provide affidavits to my attorney. Collected a significant amount of photographic evidence based on the affair partner's statements. Realized that my demanding 60 to 80-hour work weeks played right into her plans. She avoided infidelity on the weekends. Her actions were carefully calculated, according to the private investigator. The 2 people who were fed up enough to give statements were quite open about it. They insisted that they hadn't contacted her unless she had initiated contact, and so on. To my rescue, he managed to track down people she had previously dated, and 2 of them were angry enough to sign affidavits. Affidavits stating that she had cheated on me and had knowingly taken steps to keep me in the dark. Justified in certain situations, such as when one spouse significantly outearns the other or when one spouse has been out of the workforce for an extended period of time due to the marriage. In such cases, re-entering the workforce can be challenging due to extended gaps in employment, making financial support for the duration of the marriage reasonable. In my case, however, she was the one who cheated, and I didn't want to reward her for her deceitful behavior. The private investigator took pictures of her spending time with various men, mostly as evidence of her behavior. While not strictly necessary, they were part of the process by talking to some of these men. The men he traced back to 2 individuals who felt scorned by her for ending their relationships. They not only confirmed that they had been involved with her while we were married, one had even been with her before our wedding, but they also testified to her deceptive tactics. Such as not calling on weekends when I was home, never coming to the house, and insisting that I call her only after she had. Among other things, about a month after I asked her to leave, the private investigator discovered that she had gone to a club and spent time with about 10 men in a back room, which would have been about 3 months into her pregnancy. I had 0 contact with her from the time I caught her until our court date, although I did receive calls from my family. I should mention that her calls kept coming, and about a month after the divorce was finalized. He accused me of ruining his daughter's life, and I let him vent before offering to have my attorney contact her. To vent before offering to have my lawyer send him a copy of the data collected by the private investigator. She painted me as the one who had been unfaithful, even claiming that I was the one she had caught in bed with one of her girlfriends. He reluctantly agreed. My lawyer reviewed the data with the names of the men withheld, and he called me back about 2 weeks later. He apologized for yelling at me, and all contact with her family finally stopped. In essence, it was the private investigator who uncovered everything through his research, while the lawyer organized the evidence. For the court case, according to my lawyer at the time. tends to favor women, especially in cases involving children that I couldn't have, so I consider myself lucky to have avoided a more complicated situation, but my attorney warned that we would have to provide irrefutable evidence that she was the cause of our divorce in order to reduce or eliminate the financial obligations with the help of a private investigator and a few people she had pissed off along the way. We were able to do just that. Jokes from time to time, but honestly, they're worth every penny and then some. Make fun of the really good ones. He uncovered information I never knew about during the divorce. I didn't. Reimbursement for running up my credit cards. I was making a good income of about $150,000 before taxes at the time, which has since increased to $250,000 before taxes per year. To pay off those credit card charges, and considered it a costly mistake since I hadn't cancelled them, making me legally responsible for the charges, and going after them for the money would have been pointless. I wouldn't have recovered anything. Basically, I just wanted to put it all behind me, so I allowed her to take her belongings, most of the things we'd bought together. I wanted her out of my life and the reminders of our marriage out of my house. Out of my house, among other things. The one thing I absolutely did not want to do was pay her $2,000 a month for about 5 years. For about 5 years, which my lawyer said was typical. I also didn't want to have anything to do with her. I felt it would be an insult to me and a way of essentially rewarding and condoning her behavior. I was willing to continue funding her for the duration of the payments, as well as the other costs, in exchange for a quick resolution and her removal from my life. I believe she was playing some sort of game, and I viewed these expenses as a means to ensure that I met the required time frame. At the time of the divorce, it took 6 months and 1 day to complete the entire process in California. Now it's about 6 weeks if there's no contest, which is surprising. My divorce was emotionally draining, and I'm not sharing this to seek sympathy, but in the hope that my story might help. Someone else might learn from it, or see signs I missed. Looking back, I sometimes wondered if there were subtle clues I missed. I still analyze the situation, but I didn't want to get into a protracted battle. In total, the legal fees came to about $112,000. $112,000, about 6 months of alimony. The attorney informed me that I would probably have to make monthly payments to her for about 5 years, so I saved a considerable amount of money on that, but it could have potentially longer depending on the judge's decision. She didn't end up getting the $2,000 a month once the judge heard all the details during the final divorce hearing since the divorce was finalized. I have not seen her again, but I know she is in Arizona because she has tried to apply for credit in my name there 3 times. She decided to go through with the pregnancy, but I am very confident that the child is not mine. It is likely that she was. I acknowledge that I was manipulated, and I take responsibility for my part in it every day. She has to live with the consequences of her actions every day, which probably makes it even harder for her. Even though she doesn't know me anymore, she may be aware that she once had a good life, but her actions led to her downfall. Growing the business I partially owned and also increasing my income. She may still be in touch with some of our mutual friends. But I don't inquire about that. Yes, she caused me emotional pain, and she tried to gain money as a form of compensation, but she did not succeed, and I am moving on with my life. Death would be too easy for someone to escape. Like her, many people think I should have reacted differently when I caught her in my bed instead of running away from my house. I understand where they're coming from, and believe me, I considered it was the best choice to avoid a physical altercation or worse. I could have easily escalated the situation. I readily admit that I was deceived. The more I look back, the more I suspect that she never really loved me. I was merely a means to an end for her, and I accepted my part in it by providing her with the perfect opportunity. I was seldom home during the week, and when I returned I was exhausted and eager to rest because another day of work awaited me. She just needed to make sure she was home and asleep before I arrived, because I'm someone who values transparency. She always knew my schedule. I was actually being played, and I was playing right into her hands. I'm just thankful that the STD test I took 2 days after I caught her came back negative. Update: there is a question that some of you may have about the child she was pregnant with. I'm ashamed to admit it, but she was planning on passing it off as mine. Certificate, and I didn't even make her take a DNA test after the divorce. Was born, and it turned out to be Asian. Not a surprise, I had expected it. She had some elaborate story about the baby. Because of her grandmother's heritage, and she insisted that it was mine, but the reality is this. So there's no telling who the real father is. It's a messed up situation, and I'm just glad I got out of it without being on the hook for child support. As for the baby, I heard through the grapevine that she ended up giving it up for adoption. It's a sad situation all around, and I can't imagine what the kid will go through when he inevitably finds out about his parents' deception. As for me, I'm fine. Okay, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in. My wife and I were just 6 weeks away from celebrating our 25th anniversary when I discovered that she had been involved in a multi-year affair with a 33-year-old bartender from New York City. I'll call my soon-to-be ex-wife Maddie. She's 48 and I'm 49, and we have one adult child, our 24-year-old son. I had always assumed that we had a wonderful marriage, and I considered Maddie as my best friend, someone I could trust with my life, and we got along very well. Of course, we had minor disagreements along the way, but we always managed to work through them. Our connection in the bedroom was especially strong because we were both very adventurous and had very high libidos. We enjoyed trying new things and kept our relationship exciting by going on dates, taking romantic vacations, and having fun in the bedroom. Surprisingly, we even engaged in intimate activities in unconventional places like the car or the outdoors. It may sound immature to some, but it reflected how much we valued each other. I was genuinely happy in our marriage and believed that Maddie was too. Now let me explain how I discovered the affair. Did I stumble across a suggestive email or text exchange between her and her lover? No, I did not catch her in the act. No. I actually found out when her lover's ex-girlfriend, who I'll call Sarah, contacted me on LinkedIn and sent me a message asking if we could talk. When we talked, I couldn't understand it at first. The information she was sharing, and I thought it might be some kind of prank Maddie was playing on me. My world was shattered when Sarah sent me a series of pictures and a video showing Maddie engaged in intimate acts with another man. It was a painful reality that I couldn't escape seeing Maddie in such intimate moments with a stranger. I am deeply wounded and I doubt that I will ever be able to erase these haunting images from my mind. In my eyes, Maddie has committed the most serious betrayal of our marriage, and I don't see. Now, let me provide some context as to how this affair unfolded. Maddie's corporate office is located in New York City, and she travels there a few times a year for work meetings. These meetings typically take place early in the week, so her usual routine is to fly out on Sunday afternoon and return on Tuesday evening. This pattern has been consistent throughout her tenure with the company. When she travels to NYC, Maddie always stays at one of the hotels within walking distance of her office. It was at one of these hotels that she met her lover. Her younger lover was a man 15 years her junior who, according to Sarah, the former girlfriend, worked as a bartender. Of Maddie's lover, they had an instant connection and spontaneously hooked up one night 3 years ago. They continued their rendezvous every year for the next 2 years until the affair ended last year. According to Sarah's account, Maddie's lover claimed that they were only together 5 times, and that all of these encounters took place on Sundays. Evenings in Maddie's hotel room, he insisted that they never shared a kiss and that he always used protection. Find it hard to believe his claims. Sarah mentioned that she discovered the affair 6 months after it ended, when she stumbled across explicit messages and pictures on his old smartphone. She confronted him and he admitted to the affair. The affair, which led to Sarah kicking him out of her life. Unable to afford his own apartment in Manhattan, he had no choice but to quit his bartending job and move back to Long Island. I asked Sarah why it had taken her so long to reach out to me. She explained that she hadn't planned to tell me at first, but her new boyfriend, who had had experienced infidelity himself and despised cheaters. He convinced her to tell me, so she finally did, and I asked if she knew why. According to her, Maddie ended the affair because she confessed her love for me. After absorbing all of this information, I took some time to grieve and consider my next steps. After careful consideration, I made the decision to divorce Maddie. Although I still love her, I can never trust her again. And the image of her with that bartender will always haunt me. I have decided not to confront her directly. Instead, I plan to catch her off guard by serving her with divorce papers. Opportunity to explain herself or hear her excuses and apologies. I intend to make the day she receives these papers so emotionally charged that she will feel worse than I did when I discovered her affair. It's my way of getting revenge. For her betrayal, in the meantime, I will pretend everything is normal and act exceptionally kind. That this kind of situation can happen to anyone, even after 27 years of marriage. Imagine that I'd be one of those people sharing my personal story with the world, but here I am. For the married men out there, never get too complacent in your marriage and stay vigilant, always stay vigilant. My friends, once the divorce papers are prepared, I intend to move my belongings into storage and arrange to have them served at her home. Serve her with the papers at her place of employment. If she contacts me, I will inform her that I've known about this for weeks and I will provide proof by sending her one of the explicit pictures Sarah has shared with me every time she tries to contact me. I'll send her another picture and another after that, and then I'll inform both of our families of my decision to divorce her and the reasons why. My decision to divorce her and the reasons behind it. At this point, I am firm in my decision and eagerly awaiting the day when I can. Day when I can disrupt her life as much as she disrupted mine. First update, damn, why do things never go as planned? The day came to serve Maddie, and everything seemed to be falling into place. In the morning and afternoon, a courier delivered the divorce papers to her office and served Maddie as expected. She reacted strongly and immediately called me, to which I responded by informing her that I knew all the details about her affair with the bartender. Details about her affair with the bartender, her boy toy, and that I had initiated divorce proceedings. I told her that I had already moved out and advised her to consult a lawyer, then I ended the call. As I had expected, she began to call me repeatedly, and in response I sent her the first photo with her. Each time she tried to contact me, I sent her another picture, and at that point, everything was unfolding just as I had planned. I called my son later that evening and told him the news. He was surprised and understandably upset. He asked if there was any chance of reconciliation, to which I replied no, not after what she had done. After our conversation, I was about to call my parents when my mother contacted me. She informed me that Maddie had just left her house, where she had been frantically looking for me while at my parents' house. Maddie confessed everything to them and revealed that she had been in counseling since ending the affair last year. Since the affair ended last year and that she had been diagnosed with sex addiction, claiming that her infidelity was a result of this mental addiction, which made it difficult for her to resist sexual temptation. Afterwards, in frustration, I went to my parents' house to have a talk with them. They both tried to dissuade me from divorcing Maddie. They didn't condone her actions, but they pointed out that it was significant that she had ended the affair and sought treatment on her own. Dad also tried to soften my stance. I told them that a person should never stay in a relationship with a cheater. And I was surprised and disappointed by their response. That labeling their actions as a result of addiction was merely an excuse for their infidelity. That if you commit a wrongdoing, you must face the consequences, the ultimate consequence or punishment for marital infidelity is divorce, and that is the path I intend to take before I leave. Decision, but asked that I take some time to think about it. I informed them that I had already done so. After returning to the apartment I had rented, I called Maddie's father to let him know that I planned to visit and talk. I wanted to visit and talk. He informed me that Maddie had just been there and had confessed everything, just as she had done with my parents. He expressed his disbelief in the whole addiction claim, but suggested that I take some time. Before making a final decision, we continued our conversation, and while I made no promises, I agreed to. I have a close relationship with Maddie's parents, so going through with a divorce would also mean losing them, which would be emotionally devastating. Which would be emotionally challenging. That night, Maddie tried to call me several times, but Saturday morning, my son called and informed me that his mother had contacted him the night before and confessed to everything. To her credit, she took full responsibility for her actions and for taking full responsibility for her actions and coming clean to our entire family, my son expressed his strong disapproval of his. He mentioned that he knew I would be under pressure from his grandparents and assured me that he would stand by me. He also mentioned that if his current girlfriend ever did anything like this to him, he would break up with her immediately, so that is the current state of affairs. Find myself in a temporary holding pattern, unsure of how to proceed, although I am eager to expedite the process of divorcing my wife. I'm also concerned that our families will perceive me negatively if I rush things. Update: I've gone through all of your comments and want to express my gratitude for the advice, even from those I may disagree with. I want to clarify that I am still committed to pursuing the divorce, but I have decided to meet with To meet with my soon-to-be ex-wife to address some issues, so to speak. 60 minutes for her to speak her mind, and that's it. My attorney strongly advised against it, but if I proceed, in his office and it will be recorded, I suggested an alternative to meet in a neutral location with witnesses and record the discussion. My attorney agreed to this arrangement, but cautioned me to be careful in my words and actions, as he has seen such meetings go badly for the cheating spouse. Tuesday at her parents' house, where my son will accompany me and record the conversation with his tripod gimbal. My son, along with my in-laws and my mother, will be in the next room during the meeting. Unfortunately, my father will not be able to attend due to a doctor's appointment at that time. My parents and in-laws. I'll post an update here after my conversation with Maddie. Third update, we had the meeting and it went surprisingly well, although it was emotionally challenging for me. I allowed her to speak without interruption, with the only request being that she not use sex addiction as an excuse. And she agreed not to. She began by expressing her love and longing for me and admitted that what she had done was wrong. After her initial statements, she looked at me and I simply responded. With an okay and a look that suggested there was more, she went on to explain. She had a moment of clarity last year after carrying on the affair for 2 years and had been in therapy since then. She confessed that she had kept all of this from me because she was afraid of losing me. Had been beneficial and that her therapists believed that she had worked through the underlying issues that led her to cheat. I asked if her therapist thought this was a temporary fix and she confirmed that it was. Then asked her how she would handle a similar situation if another young bartender came into the picture. She just looked at me and tears welled up in her eyes, so I reminded her that the clock was ticking and urged her to continue. She shifted the conversation to my happiness during our marriage and whether there was anything more she could have done for me. I acknowledged that I had been happy before the affair, but noted that there were fundamental aspects that she could have improved upon. Maddie insisted that she had been faithful and loved only me. I gave her a skeptical look and laughed in her face as she tried to justify her actions, but it didn't work. She claimed that she only cheated when she was away, so she never neglected me. That the lack of kissing and the use of rubbers somehow made a difference, it was quite absurd and she seemed to expect me to be impressed. I urged her to listen to herself as she sounded completely ridiculous. She made it clear that she wasn't defending her actions. I was just trying to explain her thought process and asked her why she had done it if she was supposedly happy with our relationship. She admitted that she was simply seduced by the idea of a young, attractive man. Since I was physically interested in her, despite my making her feel beautiful, she believed she was no longer attractive. At this point, 45 minutes had passed, and I reminded her that she had only 15 minutes left to present her case. She suggested that if I gave her another chance, we could go back to where we were before. I reiterated that this was impossible. Impossible because I could never trust her and the mental image of her with her boy toy would haunt me every time I looked at her in despair. She suggested the idea of a one-way open relationship. She suggested that I could do whatever I wanted with whomever I wanted while she would remain faithful to me. This brought her to tears and she spent the rest of the time pleading for me to take her back. I simply allowed her to cry and beg without saying a word. When the hour was up, I got up and picked up the gimbal with my son's phone attached, and left the room before I left. My son used the Dropbox app to send me the video, and then I left. Later that evening, Maddie sent me a text thanking me for meeting with her, but I chose not to respond. Now that I've completed this task, my plan is to contact my lawyer tomorrow morning and instruct him to expedite the divorce proceedings. Final update, our divorce was officially finalized last Wednesday. We divided our assets equally, and Maddie chose to stay in our family home and buy out my share of the equity she claims. This decision is rooted in the belief that we could reunite there and live together again. Eventually, the divorce process took a heavy emotional and mental toll on me as time passed. My resolve wavered and I considered reconciling with Maddie on numerous occasions, but I knew deep down that doing so would. During our initial hearing, the judge ordered 60 days of counseling. She informed our attorneys that we had to complete these sessions before she would proceed with the case. I questioned my attorney about her authority to make such a demand, and he informed me that she did indeed have the authority. To do so and that there wasn't much we could do to challenge it. against making any strong objections or challenges, warning that it could potentially work against me. Since the judge might use it against me, I went through 16 counseling sessions. Maddie could have made the whole process more difficult and expensive, but she chose not to. I was grateful for that, and to show my gratitude, I took her out to dinner the day after our divorce was finalized. And then returned to our house, well, her house, for a nightcap. During our time together, we became physically intimate for the first time in over a year. You may be wondering how this made sense to me. It meant that I couldn't stay married to her. After her infidelity, I couldn't contemplate living with her again, but that didn't mean I didn't want her physically. Her physically, because I did and probably always will. We both recognize that our future relationship will revolve around physical intimacy, much like the connection she had with the bartender. Accept this arrangement for now, but expressed her desire for more, promising to keep trying while I haven't started. Dating other women is still in my plan and Maddie is aware of it, I explained. To Maddie that if any of these relationships became serious, would end our physical relationship, she understood. But she didn't want to dwell on it and expressed her commitment to staying monogamous with me even if I find someone else, even though I miss the way things used to be. I appreciate the new arrangement we have for the first time. For the first time, I feel positive about myself and the future.